Today we're going to be talking about the Sennheiser HD800S, just how good is it, and the evolution of it, and a cheaper alternative to the HD800S, and something that's actually a lot better than the HD800S. So let's go ahead and start talking about that. So originally Sennheiser came out with, I believe, the HD800. Then they tried to make a cheaper one, the HD700, and then they made a new version of the HD800 called the HD800S. And then Philips came along and made a headphone called the Shure 9500s, which sounds disturbingly similar to the HD800 original. So let's start off talking about the HD700 because honestly I thought it came out before the HD800. But it may have actually come out after. I still don't know. I still don't care. But we can go and we can look at the measurements for the HD700, HD800, HD800S, as well as we can download the Philips measurements for the Shure 9500s. So let's go ahead and download the HD700 measurement, HD800, HD800S, as well as the Shure 9500. So I always like to do this where we look at the HD700 first, and then we can talk about this thing first. So right off the bat, before we even do anything, the HD700 has this huge 6K peak problem. And we can see this being discussed all over the place. And this is the reason why also you shouldn't be watching reviews or listening to most people. You should, do your own research, but we're going to talk about that. We're going to watch this real quick. And notice he mentions shill reviews. We're going to look at a shill review right after this.
The treble. Make no mistake, the HD700 is a spicy boy, and that's kind of understating it. It is very, very sharp. Assuming that you're not reading a show review, there is no way you can read an impression of the HD700 without mentioning that monstrous peaking 6K. That is the biggest weakness of the HD700. They have taken the biggest weakness of the HD800 and then, for whatever reason, amplified it even more. And to a certain extent, that was the death knell for the HD700. No one really could like it as much. It was a very divisive, controversial headphone for the time.
So he's talking about how the HD700 is actually worse than the HD. Oops, that's the wrong headphone. Actually worse than the HD800. So when we look at the HD800, and the HD700, we can flatten this out to make it more understandable, and then we can put in the target about how a headphone is supposed to sound, so we can get a better idea of what's going on. Okay, so we can see the Sennheiser HD800 and HD700 both have a horrendous 6K peak. And both of them dip down a bit around 9K. But we see the HD700, the treble in green here, huge valley, no treble information, huge 6K peak. When the HD800, it's got more treble information, more clarity. We can see the yellow here. It just has this huge 9K cut problem. Okay. And this huge 6K peak. So when we look in the treble, it looks like huge 6K peak, huge 9K cut, comes back up. That's not good. It's supposed to be nice and smooth like this. Okay, so I'm going to change the color and get a better idea. The response is supposed to be this nice smooth treble bubble, but instead we have this huge 6K peak problem. The green line actually goes well below the treble, so there's the HD700 are very dark, like the HD600 series, but on the HD800 they tried to bring up a lot of the treble here, but we could see there's still huge holes in the treble on the HD800. But again, they both have the 6K peak problem. And if we get rid of, like, since the HD800 in yellow have some more treble extension, it makes the green peak look a lot more extreme. So, I mean, that's a huge, 6K peak, but the yellow, it tries to bring up the treble and that kind of alleviates the peak from sounding as extreme. Because there's more on either side, so that it kind of reduces the sensation of that peak compared to a much more extreme on the HD700. We can also see, again, they both have this huge ear gain scoop for a wide soundstage. And then they're very muddy with weak bass emphasis. Weak mid. They're so warm and muddy in the mids that the mid bass and the sub bass is not really emphasized very much. So these are kind of very warm and weak based. They're not punchy. They don't have any punch to them because they're so muddy. They don't have any impact. They're just kind of like this warm, rumbly thing that doesn't have any punch or impact, which is required by having more mid bass and sub bass than mids. But yeah, definitely the HD700 does have some power to the bass. But we see they got thinner on the HD800. So let's again, he mentioned shill reviews. Yeah, if you don't, and here's a shill review from CNET. And this horrifically disturbing thing that they wrote that's so funny. Why you can trust CNET. Our expert award-winning staff selects the products we cover and rigorously researches and tests our top picks. If you buy through our links, we may get a commission. So it basically is saying you can trust us, And this HD700 review, almost one of the first things he says is, Sennheiser's new HD700 over-the-ear headphones sound effortlessly without strain, harshness, or aggressive edge. Their stereo sound is more open and spacious than you'll hear from most audiophile headphones. The bass, mid-range, treble balance is very smooth. The treble balance is very smooth with no overly exaggerated frequencies. Okay, and then we go back over here and we can see that huge 6K peak. You could argue it's the upper mids and the treble. So maybe he's not lying, because maybe 6K is the upper mids, and then the treble is just completely ripped out and dark. So maybe he's not lying, because right before the treble starting above 6K, so maybe that 6K peak is not in the treble. Maybe it's the upper mids. Maybe he's playing mind games with you. Treble balance is very smooth with no overly exaggerated frequencies. So yeah, that's very disturbing. So again, they keep talking about the 6K peak problem, and that's when the HD800S come into play. We can look at the HD800S and let's try to get like red. So we see the HD8. Let's get rid of the HD700s. This is kind of just a joke to have hanging around. So the HD800 and the HD800S, the main difference is the 6 kilohertz peak problem being significantly reduced on the HD800S in red. So this peak right here is significantly reduced. So the HD800S is a lot better in that regard, but we can still see in the treble there's this huge hole. There's a huge hole from like 6.5K to like 11K. From 6 kilohertz to 11 kilohertz, the treble is gone. There's this huge dark spot in the treble on the HD800S. Okay, but let's listen to how they reduce the 6K peak.
But nonetheless, not only can you make resonators emit sound and amplify sound, but resonators can also be anti-resonant. They can be a half wavelength out of phase with the tone of interest, and these resonators can kill a tone. And so that's what Sennheiser did, is in this empty space in here is just exactly the right size to be anti-resonant to the 6 kilohertz tone that can be stimulated by the shape of the inside of the cup. So it kills the resonance and it does a great job. Measurements, if you look at the article on innerfidelity.com, linked at the bottom of this video, you can read all about it. But bottom line, this little thing does a dandy job of killing this 6 kilohertz peak. And that peak made the previous Sennheiser HD800 could be very sharp and fatiguing to listen to. Needles drilling into your eardrums at times with the wrong kind of music could really light them off. In these headphones, that's pretty much gone. And now the upper mid-range and treble is just absolutely apparently flawlessly articulate in a lot of ways. It just really does.
Yeah, I don't know about that. Okay, so, but again, we can see what he's talking about. That 6K peak on the HD800 has been eliminated. Now, while all of this is going on, Philips, has the Ship 9500s, and we can change the color to the Ship 9500s. Is something made green? We got a green here, people. Is there something taken? Okay, let's get rid of the HD700s. I was taking the green color. Okay, so if we look at the HD800 and the Ship 95, the Ship 9500, Philips Ship 9500s are cheap as dirt. And we can see they sound nearly identical in a lot of ways to the much more expensive HD800. The HD800 has better sub-bass extension than the Ship 9500s. That rolls off the sub-bass a little bit quicker, but that's not that big of a deal, to be honest with you, because the rest of the mids are very, very, very similar. The Ship 9500 is less warm and muddy in the mids. Yeah, I've owned the Ship 9500s. They're very clear. In the mids, they're not muddy, they're not bloated, they're not warm, and then they do have a little bit of a bass boost in the mid bass. So they have a little bit, they're very clear, they're not muddy, they're not warm, and they do have a little bit of bass, but it's pretty weak compared to how much bass is preferred, as we can see. But at least it's not muddy and warm to a bloated degree in the mids. Now again, they both have that 6K peak problem, and you can see the Ship 9500 actually has a smaller 6K peak than the HD800. We can see that the Ship 9500s do have a treble hole, right here. So they, you're not getting all the treble information. It sounds bright, but at the same time you can hear the holes in the treble. So you're losing treble information that you would otherwise get with like the HD800s. But again, the HD800 has this huge hole here too. So they both have holes in the treble when it should be way up here. But the Ship 9500s for like a fraction of the price, like, $50, $60, $70 versus a headphone that's over $1,000. And you get this close to a sound signature. I mean, if you just kind of trace over it, you can, especially at the median of it, I mean, you can see that the tone is very similar. You could get the Ship, that's the reason why the Ship 9500s are so popular. So that's like a cheap, we can compare the Ship 9500s to the HD800S if you want. So we can see the Ship 9500s and the HD800S. Again, similar thing with the sub bass. They're basically the same mids, the same ear gain scoop, same 6K peak. These headphones, now this again, the Ship 9500 sound almost identical to an HD800S at a fraction of the price. Okay, so if you want to buy, again, if a headphone costs more than a couple $100, they're ripping you off. You can get almost identical sound with the Ship 9500s that you can with the HD800S. They have the same tonality problems at 6K, the same treble extension, the same upper mids, maybe a little bit smooth. The upper mids are a little bit smoother on the HD800S, but I mean, again, you're saving $1,000+. And, you know, the mids are about the same. Maybe the Ship 9500 is a little less warm and muddy, a little more, you know, same mid-bass emphasis. You know, similar, you know, yes, sure, you know, the Ship 9500 roll off the sub bass a little bit more. Who cares? Okay. For a fraction of the price, you get the same sound just about. So, yeah. Now, let's just look at the HD800S and compare it to the headphones that I use. So let's get rid of the Ship 9500 so we can use the green color. And let's bring in, you know, the headphones that I use, which are the Biodynamic DT990s with worn ear pads. And we can change the color to green, probably. Or orange. Or green. Okay. So the headphones that I use, the DT990s with worn ear pads in green, we can see these headphones do not have a treble hole. The headphones that I use do not have a treble hole. They do not have a 6K peak. They do not have a treble hole. The DT990s in green here with worn ear pads have the smoothest, bestest, most intact treble. These two spikes add some shimmer, some sparkle. It's not the end of the world. It's in the air frequencies, but that smoothness without the 6K peak, without the 9K cut, and if you added like a little bit of tissue to dampen those high frequencies, that would alleviate that pretty easily. But again, this adds shimmer and sparkle, a little bit of sheen. It's not the end of the world. And then we have the sub bass emphasis, mid bass emphasis. So the DT990s that I use have a better tuned upper mids, much more intact treble bubble, much more powerful bass, much more impact and shit. So the DT990s, Biodynamic DT990s with worn ear pads outperforms all of these headphones for less than $200. So that's kind of the story of these headphones. That you can get the Biodynamic DT990s that everybody shits on. You know, we can look why again. Okay, what makes everybody say, you know, the DT990s are bad? Why is everybody like, you know, if you go to one of these audio files, you go, oh, the DT990s, the treble is terrible. With fresh ear pads, you know, with fresh ear pads. Let me try to change the color. So if we compare fresh ear pads to the HD800S, so the DT990s out of the box, they still have better bass, the DT990s, better mids, better upper mids. It's only when you get into the treble, you're like, okay, the Biodynamic DT990s have like knives. These huge, shrill, metallic peaks. You know, just everything just sounds pretty intense, pretty, you know, it sounds like there's snakes in the recording, just pss, 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 pss. You know, that's huge 6K peak fatigue. You know, this sheen, this metallic sheen, these spikes up here. Yeah, the DT990s look more fatiguing in the treble. They look more shrill, they look more harsh. And you could argue, hey, maybe the HD800 is better, even though there's this huge dark spot that's very broad. This is a very broad dark spot on the HD800S. You're losing a lot of treble information, you know, from like, you know, 6K to 13K. You can't even really hear most of that. And that's a big region. Okay. But again, once the pads get worn a little bit, you'll start to be like, oh my God, like DT990s walk all over this bitch. Much more bass dynamics, you know, cleaner mid-range, much smoother, clearer, more intact treble information. The DT990s are just better, you know. I actually came from the Ship 9500s and got the DT990s, and I could tell that the treble in the upper mid sounded more transparent, more information, more clarity, much more powerful bass, explosions and tank shells and battleships. When I first started hearing those explosions and those sounds with that extra, mid-bass boost that you get on the DT990s, when I started hearing that for the first time coming from, headphones that have more linear bass, when I first started hearing more this is balanced bass, this is analytical bass. So going from analytical bass to balanced bass boosted, this extra bass, like, oh my God, it made everything just so much more exciting. Explosions, bass, drums, all that just boom boom, like it's just right up on you, and it's it's just whoa, so it's amazing, the DT990s. And but I hope you learned some things from this video. I'll see you guys later.